everyone, this is Carl Madsen, and today I'd like to tell you about Hurup Parish in Refsherred, and we will go right into it. And if we start to focus on the name of this town, Hurup, it's probably more a small part of what is exactly this town. Rather, it is Refs, which is the dominant town in this parish. Refs is merging and moving around in the area, and likely Refs is a reflection of a reef, a massive reef called Jutland Reef, which can be seen here on the screen. This is what is a big reef. In this map we see a sailing path through the reef. We don't see that on all drawings from that time. This drawing is about 1642. This uses the old naming for the areas here. So for you who are not familiar with the area we are in at the time, 1600, 1700, we have Vendsyssel up here. We have Thyholm and Thy here, Mors here, Salling here, Hardesyssel down here, and some other ones over here. This is often called Norwegian coast. You can see it up here. There's a few towns up there. Very beautiful map indicating the situation. There is an indication of some small reefs or sandy islands around here, which is now all gone. These islands and these sandbanks on this side still exist, but the ones on this side does not. This is another map in the same series showing again the reef with the Herred, and again the majority of Hurup is named after probably reef. It says here RYFFE, Judice Reef. Here there's no sailing going through here, except it looks like there's an opening through the sand dunes over here to penetrate on the center here. There's a few measurements here. Likely these are found, meaning about 5 or 6 feet. So this is 6 times 6 feet depth right there. 9. There's 50 feet about here, which is about 15 meters. Here we have Hurup shown here. It says Hurup, the town we will talk about today. So here's yet another map. It doesn't indicate the reef that much, but it does indicate the Herred, the subdivision of this area, and Refsherred is in this Herred. And probably we could imagine that in ancient times, the seat of the what we could call a kingdom or whichever would live pulled back from the ocean, the attacks from the ocean here, and living up here, though we get exposed from any attacks from this side. But it could be the most fertile area, and where most whales or fish or whatever could sustain the population here. This map is from about a younger map than all the other ones, and it's just showing Hurup here with Refs at the bottom, and the other parishes, Hellerup and Krorup. And yeah, it is not in this one, but a few farms, a small town up here called Ederup is part of Hurup, and these houses here are called bowl houses, meaning they have very little land located to them. And again, Refs down here. So here we see the parish map, and this is all of Hurup Parish, but the largest portion is Refs. reefs, which is continuing into the other parishes like that. And in the Hurup proper, we have a farm called Lodal, and then the small town of Hurup. An important farm up here, Lodberg, which was not that prominent at the time. Søndergaard, Højris, Lodal, Hurup proper with the church right here. Balsby, we will come back to that one. And then all of Refs, with the naming in here, Refsbøl, Bilskov, Dalgård, Refskov, Refsbiskov, and so on and so forth. This is a map for, again, about 1797. And we are just trying to, on this one, get an idea of the landscape at the time. It looks very much like Hede landscape here. Refs is here. Hurup is up here with the church and Balsby and Lodale. But Refs is the centerpiece on this map. So just a summary of the reef here. There is another map here which shows the Germany Ocean or North Sea, or in Danish Vesterhavet. So here I speculate on that reef is sometimes spelled rev, meaning fox, and it's likely that people have had a name game there. If we look through oldest Danish here, is rev, Old Nordic reef, from Netherlands reef, from German reef, from English reef. So this is probably most likely how we should understand reefs. Another interesting name is Balsby, which I mentioned before. By meaning town. And what we have there is an interesting, very old name, because when we go to Max, this is from the Isle of Man, which is in the middle of the Irish Sea, very far from here. They have studied the naming structure on the island, and most of these farms are called ballocks, kind of thing. This is from a small area on the island called Ballock. And they mentioned from 1231 that this town was called Ballock. And if we look into Ballock, we do know from the maps I will show you later, Hauge, which means is similar to Lau or Lauke, meaning an area which is owned by someone or used by someone. And we have Balsby and Ballehauge, and it's very close to Ballock. What we may start to think is that the Gaelic language or Celtic language, which we nowadays start to study in a different setting, may have been used on these isles in this area. So Bal meaning more like Balle, like the bottom, or in a large rounded, soft rounded hill. So the farms or the farmsteads or small houses on this Balle would probably be the most fertile, as they will not drown in the winter waters when they arise, and not dry out too hard in the summer at the very top. So they will be situated around. Some of them, the most fertile ones, is probably southwest. And as time passes, they are subdivided typically into halves and quarters and thirds. But we can come back to that. So what is very important for us in this to study genealogy in Hurup is that there is a big hole, a gap in the church book for Hurup. So the book is quite excellent. It starts in around 1650s or something like this, 1669, and goes all the way up to 1787, but there's a massive gap there. I really tried to improve the ability for people to find their forefathers in this town by going closer into this one. And I have started a website on Geni. It basically goes through census, goes back through time, identifying all the families in each and every town, create links to each of these peoples and family leader, family head of the household, goes through the time in this period of time all the way back to 1739. All the other records which can be found, it just goes on and on and on to help people adjust, and then picking up from other church books and so on and so forth. I think this way of working has captured, I would think, about 80% of the people there, though the records are incomplete. The exact date of birth may be missing because the church book is not there, the exact date of marriage, but most of this can be triangled from a variety of sources. So if you have families in Hurup, you would want to make yourself familiar with this one. What we have here is a review of Hurup based on the maps from around 1789, very detailed plot maps. And there we find numerous place names. The green ones here is place names, and that's like dozens and dozens and dozens of place names. It's very informative for our studies for the age of this settlement. This one is a review of all the text and tombstones and so on from Hurup, and there was not much left from previous times which could be found to help us understand who is here. Most of the things which are left there is from after 1800. The Matriculus, meaning the lists, the almost yearly lists of people paying tax in Hurup, is very, very detailed in many periods of time. So that's a massive source for genealogists. The maps I talked about before with the place names. The place names are found on a map like this. And this is Hurup proper up north with Lodale and Etterup here. And the church here, Hurup, is subdivided by this blue line. I managed to put this on this map. And again, the details of this is a farm extract, which I will come back to. But around 1612, where we have some of the large farms developed. So this is Balsby, which is supposed to be a town and may have been in the past, but now is a farm in this case. And here are all the owners through 1612 to 1787. And you can see it has been divided and subdivided and assembled. Here we have for Lodale, and the lot number here, the blue is the lot number. We again have from Reps Gård, and another one for Reps Bisgård or Ref Bisp Have. Bisgård, a variety of names has been used to indicate the whole or part of this. Likely Biskov would be the most covering. Here we have the church located here. I think we want to talk a little bit about the church again. The stone setting around the church, this is about 1790. There's another map from 1790 as well, showing the surrounding farms and the access point to the church from south. The National Museum has developed a whole review of this church, which can be read on the internet, and it shows the history of this, the map indicating the various parts. I think this has got to be the church tower, and this is the apsis. Here you go through weapon house, and as usual you have this is the latest ombygning, 1938, the additions and drawings. At several point of time, Hurup had its own parish, like in the sense that it was, they had the priests for themselves, but normally it's 3 parishes combined into one, the neighboring Bodum and Ydby. But through times, Hurup was on its own, so I had reviewed the possible location for the priest and his farm, and it's likely this number 1 here. And on this map is the church over there, probably this is the one. And in this review here, we are looking at the priest only for Hurup. We have the capellans. I just don't know where they lived. I never figured that out. But they are identified, most of them, on Geni, so you can see if this is your family. So again, with the teacher, the school teacher, in Hurup, they at times had their own, so I grayed out the Ydby Bodum ones, and he has separated the Hurup ones whenever that is possible, because it's so mixed into one another, so it's really hard. And I had quite a big challenge in getting these on Geni and figure out who they were and develop this further. School building and school indicated. It was close to Batsby. The church is about over here on this side of the map. So this is the situation with some houses over here. The church is right here. The school is there, Batsby is there, something like that. There's another map showing the body of buildings, and I have colored them here. So I would say this is the school itself, and this is his house, and probably this is, or obviously this is the house for the teacher, and this is his barn. We will now take a look at war events happening in Hurup 1627 to 29 about. And this is a not often mentioned chapter or episode in the 30 Years' War, which took place in the beginning of the 1600s all over Europe. And what happened in Jutland was there was basically 2 episodes, and this is just about the first one, again 1627 to 9, where the entire peninsula of Jutland is occupied by forces. There's no direct war events happening. It's just an occupation. The Danish king lost a war south of the border, and the winning party basically just occupied all of Jutland and had their troops doing exercises and plundering and quarter space around in Jutland, and we will focus on the part in what happened in Hurup. The leader of this occupation was Albrecht von Wallenstein, and he is from Bohemia, which is about where Czechia and Slovakia is today. And they occupied the borders south of the Baltic Sea and all of the peninsula of Jutland. The picture here is from the war zone around Stralsund, which is about up here between Sweden and Denmark. So this is the Feldmarschall, the Marquis, what is Marquis Albrecht von Wallenstein. And what we see up here is another battle at Berenberg, where the Danish king lost. I would think this is Berenberg in the back right here, and this is the victorious army here behind him, going against the Danes over here. This is not to talk about the 30-year war or by any stretch pretend I have studied this in details. But the most important thing to understand is this war went on for 30 years all over Europe, and some of the main events are shown here in red dots. You could, where is that? Yes, the way the war is divided in Wikipedia is a phase 1 from 1680 to 1635, which consists of Bohemian Revolt, Palatinate, campaign, Danish intervention, and then after this one, a Swedish intervention. And the Danish intervention is the focus we have today, not all the way from 1625, but only from 1627 to 28-29. The 30-year war continued after in a phase 2 with a lot of happenings. So here we have the thing that day. It was August 8 of 1629. They were out and take a look at these estates, and it looks like the main contingency of these occupying forces has been up in Hassing at a farm there just around the church, where there also is an exercise area for the tiny army up there. And what we may have to imagine after this is probably that this army has been trying to plunder the small farms by threats and so on and so forth, and by threatening to do damage. And we will now go and take a look at the damage. Then they were first in Hurup, in Revs, in Niels Madsens farm, and there were 2 houses broken. There were grain sown on the fields, which was Ry, barley and oats. Probably it sounds like it is appropriate for the size of the farm. So basically what they're saying here, the houses are broken down quite a lot. It says nedbrudt. That means that they are not really standing well. So we have to imagine if there's people there, they will live in one single room and the rest of the house has broken down. But they have been capable of sewing, which is exceptional. Then they went to the next farm, which is Niels Lauritsen. And it seems there's no damage to the farm because they're not mentioning it. So they are telling us there's grain sown. That's again rye, barley, and oat. And like it sounds also like it's appropriate to the size of the farm. We then go to Peter Poulsen, his farm, and there was a house demolished, that means gone, and also a part of a country house, probably meaning a house you can live in and probably farm a part of it. And nothing was sown in this farm. So this is pretty bad. They're not saying it's deserted, but we could consider that Peter Poulsen may not be there anymore. Then they go to the next farm, which is Mads Christensen, and here they saw there was one house broken down, and there was sown some barley. They're not saying any of the land was not sown appropriately. They're just saying how much was sown, and that may be appropriate to the size of the farm. Then they went to Peter Christensen, his farm, and there was a house there broken down, and half of another house may have been broken down, is what they are trying to say. And the grain which was sown here was rye and what is that again? Barley and oats. Then they went to Christian Andersen's farm, and there was a house broken down. The grain sown was rye, barley, and oats. Then they went to Lars Madsen's farm, and it seems as nothing has happened to his house. The grain sown was rye and barley and oats. Then they continue we go to Niels Simonson's farm, and there was a house broken down here, and there was sown rye and oats. Again to Anders Christensen, his spot, meaning a tiny farm or a house with some land around it, and there was sown some barley. Anders Jensen, his spot, and he has not sown anything. So this is pretty bad. Søren Lauritsen, he has sown some grain and some barley. Nothing seems to have happened to his house. Eske Christensen, his spot, nothing has been sown here. Jeppe Christensen, and here they saw part of his barn was demolished and the house was demolished, and nothing has been sown here. So this is a terrible situation for Jeppe Christensen. Christian Sørensen, they went to next, is seems to be okay with the house, and some grain has been sown, so which is barley and oats. Peter Lauritsen again, there was part of the living quarters deserted. The barn was broken and ruined, and grain was sown 6 small parts of barley. So this is horrible. Oluf Pedersen, now they are in Balsby, as we remember, is part of Hurup. That's the large farm out there, which I talked about earlier, which is Parish, the same as in Max in the language of Isle of Man. So next I was in Balsby to Oluf Pedersen's house. The house was broken down and spoiled, and the grain sown was some rye, barley, and oats. Now we go to the part of Balsby of Hurup up north is the Lodale, and there's 2 parts of Lodale. Thomas Laursen has the first part, then Lodale in Thomas Laursen's part of the farm where the windows were knocked out, and the what is that called? The stove, the steel stove were broken the door to it, and free chest was chopped in pieces. So they have been really violent on this one. And there was sown some barley and oats on his field. Then in Jens Jensen's part of Lodale, windows were broken and so on and so forth, but there was grain, rye, and barley and oats. So he was not. Where we have Niels Christensen, his farm, grain was sown and so on and so forth, so his farm seems okay. Then we were in Peter Jensen's lot, and some grain and oats and so on was sown. Ivar Laursen, his house was broken, and there was sown like the other ones. Mads Espelsen, his part, a house was broken, and there was sown some rye and what is that, barley and oats. Gregers Eskesen and his wife Birgitte Laurensdatter, likely he's dead, and that's his surviving widow. There was sown rye and barley and oats. Niels Christensen in his farm, he seems to be okay. The grain sown as everyone else. And Laurits Christensen, he has a house completely demolished, and part of another one apparently also demolished. So he had the same 3 sorts of grain sown here. And Christensdatter, they were in Højbold, and the Saul house, meaning probably the living quarters, and also the barn was broken, but they were sown on the fields. And then finally at Anders Lauritsen, they were at his farm, and no grain had been sown at his farm. So in order for us to make sense of the war, we will take a look at the Matriculus, which shows here on the screen. And we have here Hurup. Up here we have the year 1625 to 6, the people living there, And in 1629, we have from the Tingbog, we just heard what happened to these people. This is the list of the people. Then we have Vestervig final tax contribution, also from year 1629. And out here it says what tax they have paid. Quit means they have been paying, they got a discount and they paid this one. Øde means deserted, and I think there was another one. It could be anyway down here. It could be armod, meaning it's so bad they don't pay anything, but they are living there. So if I remind you about these two things here, this is a small Hurup town of a few houses, and here is what happened immediately after the war is, the soldiers has left, and there's no more occupation. The area has been liberated, you could say. So we could take a look at Gregers Eskesen here. He is mentioned here with his widow Birgitte Lauritz-datter. And it looks like, if you move this a little bit, we already have him in 1612, I believe. Yeah, right there at the top here. So they lived there for some times. There's a misspelling there, Gunnar Eriksen. I think it's more likely he's Gregers Eskesen. He's not mentioned in 1625 to 6 for whatever reason, but he appears in 1629 and again 1629, and that's probably his widow. And he has just been put down. He has paid maybe about half of the taxes that year. And it says that they, if I remind you, they were in Gregers Eskensen's, his wife or widow, Birgitte Lauritz-datter, and there was sown this much. So it sounds like she was kind of okay. But Anders Lauritsen at the bottom here, he is deserted. He has deserted the entirety of the farm. So he's obviously not there anymore. I can't see he's mentioned out here. So whatever happened to him. And this way we can study each of these members of the families. And further, if you want to locate where they have been living, when we go to 1662, it starts to become numbers to these farms. So if we can determine which one we are talking about, then we would know where the location is. Until then, we wouldn't know. So this wraps up the study of 1629 for this time. I will come back with more from the Tingbog as I progress on that one and come to other parts of Thy where this is appropriate and there's more information. So thank you for this time and talk to you soon.